So the next plenary is the economics for the Anthropocene, and this is a really exciting project between three universities: McGill, York University, and University of Vermont, all with a great propensity for the discipline of ecological economics. Vermont is the Gunt Institute. McGill with Peter Brown, a number of other professors, and of course FES with Ellie, Perkins, Peter Victor, Chris Ahoyka, and
Peter Timmerman.
Peter Timmerman. A lot of real good connections at all three universities. So we're going to have Ellie moderate the session today with Peter Brown from the School of the Environment at McGill University, and John Erickson, a professor and interim dean of the Rubenstein School of the Environment and Natural Resources at the University of Vermont, also a previous president of UC, if I'm not mistaken. So please give a great welcome to these three guests on what is a new way of kind of understanding the way we need to do education and economics. And I think we all realize that we need a bit of a rethink. So please give them a hand.
Thank you, Andreas. And thank you all who have remained with us and contributed to this conference throughout its 3 days. I think it's been a really wonderful opportunity for us in Canada with some guests from other places to consider these questions. And as I said in my plenary on the first day, I do think Canada has a big responsibility and a special place in the world and a special potential for implementing ecological economics ideas. So I am very honored to be able to be the moderator for this panel, and I would like to introduce John Erickson and Peter Brown in a little bit more detail and get right into it. And I hope that we will have some time at the end for discussion, although I know they both have a lot to say. So Peter Brown will speak first. He is a professor at the McGill School of the Environment, Natural Resource Sciences, and Geography, and he's former head of the School of the Environment at McGill. He was founder of the Institute for Philosophy and Public Policy at the University of Maryland in a former life, before he immigrated to Canada like I did. And he was founder of the School of Public Policy there and its environmental programs. He's written 3 books on the shortcomings of economics, and his Doctor of Philosophy is from Columbia. And he is now the principal investigator or the director of this new project linking McGill with York University and the University of Vermont called Economics for the Anthropocene. And I think that's one of the things he's going to be talking about. John Erickson, let me just introduce both of them so that we can move from one to the next. John Erickson is professor of ecological economics and the interim dean of the Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources at the University of Vermont in Burlington. He previously managed the Gunt Institute for Ecological Economics, and as Andreas said, he's past president of the U.S. Society for Ecological Economics. His work involves the theory and practice of ecological economics with application to climate and energy policy, watershed management, sustainable forestry, and One Health. And he studied at Cornell. So thank you both, and let's get into it.
John and I are going to talk about a program that we're getting underway between our two universities in York, and it has a pretty bold idea behind it that we need to basically shift not only our paradigm of economics, but we need to shift our worldviews in order to have a reasonable chance of surviving, or perhaps even, if we're lucky, flourishing in the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene, as I hope everybody knows, is basically a term for the human takeover of the planet. And I've quoted, put a quote up here on the screen that's from 2 of the founders of this term, and basically saying, we're in a new age, right? The Holocene has ended. That period of relative stability and calm has come to an end. And we're now in a new game, but I guess the shorthand of my talk is we're in a new game, but with old ideas, right? And so I want to talk about where some of those old ideas came from and suggest at least some things that we might do about it. So let's see, I'm pushing the wrong. Should be this.
Use this guy.
Good. Okay, so I think my talk is really pretty simple, but I want to give a metaphor that makes it, I hope, even simpler. And it comes from a movie by Peter Sellers called The Magic Christian. And he's the richest man in the world in the movie, and he's holding a meeting of his various company heads on a train. And all of his companies are doing badly. And so he says, gentlemen, they're all men. He says, you're all fired, and and you have to, with stopping the train, you have to get off. And so they get off, and as they get off, he hands each of them a map. Now, the train is stopping somewhere in Yorkshire, but none of the maps are maps of Yorkshire, right? They're maps of, downtown Auckland, Moscow, Toronto, but no map of Yorkshire. And I think this is an analogy for what universities do, right? We give people conceptual maps of the world, but they're not maps of the way things really are. And I think this is one of the reasons that the human project is now into the Anthropocene going to be a very difficult era at best. And so this is a very complex subject, but I'm trying to make it quite simple. There are basically two worldviews that are in play at the time. One has Judeo-Christian Muslim sources stemming also from ancient Greece, and then with a turn for things going even more badly in the Enlightenment. And then there's another worldview that started around 1800 called the modern scientific synthesis, which has coalesced around the two ideas of evolution and complexity, particularly in the post-World War II period. And so my thesis is really very simple, that much of what is taught in universities rests on worldview number one, even though we are now, in fact, there's a broad but not complete, but very broad scientific consensus that the world operates according to the principles of evolution and complexity. So in worldview one, there's the Western culture has embraced what I call and other people call the Emancipation Project. This is the project to free ourselves from nature, from others, and from ourselves. And to manufacture, to take the last one, maybe it's slightly more problematical, to manufacture and resituate self-understanding so that it fits the domination project. There are other things that have brought about this unhappy state of affairs, including material factors like agriculture, technology, money, population growth, and so forth. And I'm not talking about those here. I'm just talking about the ideational dimension of this. Already talked about that. Now, the Emancipation Project is embedded in a failed master narrative and an ethic of transformation aided by technology and capitalism. It comes from a really great book by Carolyn Merchant called Reinventing Eden, The Fate of Nature in Western Culture. This is an extremely well-argued and to me a convincing book about how the biblical stories of the fall and other stories coming from Judeo-Christian tradition have shaped our culture and resulted in at least in my view, a very, very bad set of outcomes. So the narrative, as everybody knows, begins with the creation of man in God's image, the creation of Eve taking out of Adam's rib, and then the fall. Right? This is a narrative of creation and expulsion from paradise, and part of this narrative is that God made man in His image. As you can see that in the picture I showed from 1515, and gave the world to men and the sons of men, and it says that rather explicitly in the Old Testament. So if you ladies think it's a slightly patriarchal arrangement, you're right. And here's a drawing by Thomas Cole, this would be around 1825, 1830, of expulsion from the garden. And if you just look at the, I've seen the original of this picture, and it's not a whole lot clearer than this portrayal of it. But the main ideas are here. Behind the wall is paradise, right? There's a garden of plenty, there's a stream, a beautiful, safe place in which nothing is desired. And then, so there, Adam and Eve are thrown out. You recall there's a sword protecting the entrance to the garden. And if you look in the details of the wilderness in which they're then living, it's full of menacing creatures. It's dark and it's dangerous. Right? So what Carolyn Merchant's book basically says is that Western culture can be understood as an attempt to regain its place in a world of perfection. And there's a very famous quote here from Francis Bacon, who many feminists love to hate. So it's worth reading because it's really got the sort of core of a lot of what goes on in it, I think. Man by the fall fell at the same time from his state of innocency and from his dominion over creation. Both of these losses can in this life be on some part repaired, the former by religion and faith, and the latter by arts and sciences. That's really the underlying rationale for large universities like McGill and many other ones, that we can take back a dominant position in the world, and this was written by Bacon probably around 1605 or so. And then in the succeeding centuries of the 18th and 19th centuries, capitalism and amazing technological developments carried this mission forward. And this comes with the notion that we, meaning Europeans, I don't mean everybody in this room is European, I'm speaking about me, I'm a European, right? Are the rightful dominators of the planet. And here's a wonderful unapologetic representation of this in this massive image of a white woman, looks a lot like the Statue of Liberty, pushing off the buffalo, the Aboriginal people. And if you look at the right-hand side of the picture, you'll see that the bright light is coming from Europe, and the darkness is the wilderness that she is helping to push back. And she's carrying with her the technology probably of the telegraph and a book, either the Bible or a book of law. You can't see it in the picture. So this resulted in laying the groundwork for European triumphalism, and rests on the notion that there's a chosen species, the humans, a chosen people, the people of the book, and lays the groundwork for the sort of takeover of the earth, and sets us well on the way, in my view, toward the Anthropocene. So here's a picture of success, right? Restoration to the garden. If you compare this to Thomas Cole's pictures, remarkably the same set of ideas, right? It's a warm, safe place. This is the Edmonton Mall, just in case you're wondering, right? Right. Great little stream. You can have Coke and candy, right? And, it's a paradise rediscovered, right? This is what our project is, right? So anyway, I think that's. Look, this is a really complicated and big subject, right? So I'm just trying to give you her argument, sort of very compressed, but I think it's very compelling. So probably nobody in Canada knows this song, but in the States there's a country western song that says using your Bible as your roadmap, and using my Bible as a roadmap. And so my answer to that, if you're using your Bible as a roadmap, you're lost, right? Because this depicts a cosmology and a metaphysics that is not true. Okay, so how does this play out in higher education? Here's where I think a lot of the mischief begins. I don't think Chris is going to like this, but we're going to have lunch. We've already agreed to have lunch later, so we'll stick with that. So when I was thinking about this, when I was working in the field of ecological economics, it occurred to me that what ecological economics says about conventional economics is that it needs to be connected to the narrative of contemporary science in a systematic way. And then it struck me that that's actually a criticism that can be made of a number of disciplines. And so I came up with the metaphor of an orphan discipline, a discipline which is still alive, is still taught and used as a way of shaping our thinking in the world, but whose metaphysical and scientific assumptions have collapsed. So it's a little bit hard to say exactly which disciplines fit that, but the ones that I think are clear candidates for being orphans and therefore for adoption are economics, finance, law, governance, ethics, and religion. And I'm not going to talk about the second two of those, ethics and religion. I talked about ethics before in the conference, and religion, it's too complicated to handle in the short time I've got. So I will talk about economics, finance, law, and governance, and how they are giving people an image of the world that is not the way the world in fact is. Okay, so economics has, and this is a little bit illustrated in Chris's talk a little bit ago, has a number of unrealistic assumptions that you can get just out of economics textbooks. The economy is a closed system with no connection to energy and material flows. Economic actors obey fixed decision rules. The universe obeys the laws of Newtonian mechanics. That would not be stated, by the way. I shouldn't say that would be explicitly stated in an economics book. There are no biophysical limits to the expansion of market systems, and it's foolish to interfere with market dynamics. Now, not all economists believe all those things. I'm quite aware of this, but I think this is a fair characterization of introductory economics courses. So what we've done is in effect, in the way we've turned over the operation of things to the central bankers, is we are leaving the running of the planet to people who are using the Bible as their roadmap, right? They haven't got a connection between their frame of thinking and contemporary scientific understandings of what happens. So in this group, everybody knows what these are, the problems with macro, what it measures. It's a closed system and thinking in an open systems world. It's linear thinking in a world of complex systems, and there's no concept of biophysical limits. So finance, interestingly enough, in the way ecological economics has developed as a framework of inquiry, is that finance has been mainly ignored by ecological economists. That's partly, I think, just an accident of the training of the people who helped to found the most recent iteration of ecological economics. But I've read, for about a couple of years ago, I read a finance textbook for the first time, which I found absolutely astonishing. So here are the metaphysical assumptions that underlie at least that book that I read. Most of the assumptions of economics are in there. More money seems to mean more wealth. Inflation is the only indicator of there being too much money, and this can be controlled by the central banks. And the relationship of the quantity of money to the size of the earth seems not to be thought about, right? Could there be more money than there is earth? As far as I could tell in the finance literature that I know something about, it's not considered. And here's just a chart of just the growth in financial assets. The only thing I want you to get out of this, and probably the only thing I can explain, is the relationship between the size of these peaks here. So from in the early 80s to around 2008, there was a massive increase in financial instruments, while at the same time the ability of the earth to support life actually probably declined. Okay, so that's two of the four. Law is a little more complicated. Thomas Berry makes a point in the great work that within the Anglo-Saxon countries, the principal relationship between humans and the earth is through the relationship of property. And so I want to talk a little bit about how a lot of the assumptions of property have collapsed, and therefore how a lot of the assumptions of the law should collapse in those countries, and how, although they are being modified at the margin, there is not a thorough rethink of law going on in most places. So here are the assumptions that underlay Locke's theory of property this would be written in about 1688 or so. Locke assumes, and is a good Puritan, that the earth is a gift from God to men. Ownership rights in the earth derive from improving the earth for the benefit of humans. There is no limit to ownership provided there is enough and is good left over for others. But Locke assumes that others mean other people, right? He doesn't have any standing at all for other species. He refers to other, except that you shouldn't treat them gratuitously meanly. But they there's no standing for there's no notion that there could be a duty to another being other than that particular duty of avoiding cruelty. And there's also, and this is a more recent but still partly embedded in Locke, there's the land can be thought of as broken up into pieces. It's severable, and it's possible to define the boundaries of ownership. And lastly, that ownership provides incentives for care. Right? This is a very problematical assumption, I think, because of net present value imperatives and other ways in which have been used to decimate the world's forests. So this is a picture a graduate student of mine found. The Aboriginal reaction to this is that, well, we don't understand the whole idea, right? The whole idea of severability of land and the notion that something could be blocked off and then sold is unintelligible in this kind of a culture. So what I want to show with those, and I'm not going to go through each of these reasons, I'm just going to, the collapsed assumptions slide, it's just none of those assumptions, particularly the first three, are consistent with an understanding that comes from contemporary science. 2 minutes? Really? Wow. That's not going to be easy to do. So I wanted to say something about Thomas Jefferson. So I just say a little bit about let me see. Gonna see where I'm gonna get to here, right? Okay, so here's a short point, right? Okay, so the perils of the sovereign nation state. Here's how the world is conceived. Here's how the world is, right? So the way we think about the planet and the way the planet is are very, very, very different phenomena. And so the result of this, of these misleading, I think, ways of framing the issues, the human-Earth relationship that goes on in a lot of higher education, is captured by this picture from Goya that we're eating our own children. And I think that these frames have done much to bring about the current crisis, and the project that John, Ellie, and I are involved with is an attempt to find another way of thinking about this. If I've only got 2 minutes, I can't go through much of this. But let me think about this. Yes, I'm going to go just to this. So what we need to do, looked at in the way I've been presenting this, is we need to reground and redeploy the orphans and their progeny in the evolutionary narrative. We need to take these disciplines apart, pull them up to the contemporary evolutionary narrative, and see how they would be different. And that's one of the major projects that we hope to undertake in this partnership we're putting together. And here's just a map of where we would hope to get to. So this is a map made by a friend of mine, John Fullerton. So we want to have as a foundation the scientific insights of the evolutionary complex system narrative, coupled with the ancient insights from some of the Aboriginal or Native First Nations spiritual traditions and some of the older spiritual traditions of also the more mainstream religions. And then use that to rethink the orphans. So starting here, finance, economics, governance, law, and so forth. And then hopefully that is a way that we can reconstruct knowledge and rechart our way to live more successfully in the Anthropocene. So I left out a whole section there on governance. It's a little bit complicated, but I could make similar, my arguments would basically be similar. It's rest on assumptions from the Treaty of Westphalia, from the deism of the 18th century and so forth, and that so that we have really a very misleading frame on governance itself. So thank you very much.